Corsair finally dropped the awaited but also sort of expected Frame 5000D case. Now I did go to Computex this year and I got a chance to see it at their booth before I got my sample here to review. And to be honest, when I reviewed the Frame 4000D months ago, knowing how well that case did and given the successes of the Legacy 4000 and 5000 series, it just made sense to move both models into the refresh. So here in this video, I will be covering the Frame 5000D, just as the title of the video says. Just a bit of context, both the Frame 4000 and 5000 are mid-towers, and I think the bigger brother 5000 here, if it was any bigger, it could probably make the full tower bracket. So let's not waste any time and dive right in. When you unbox it, the first thing you'll pull is the accessory kit before you get to the case. As we go through the review, I'll just be taking things out from this kit where applicable. Starting with some surface specs and pricing. Frame 5000D will have two colors, which are black and white, and two variants, non-RGB and RGB, both of which are pre-installed with four 140mm RS series fans, and the fans are what dictates the RGB. The non-RGB cases are priced at $190, while the RGB will be at $200. Size and weight of the case will be displayed here if you want to pause, as well as a side-by-side comparison to the Frame 4000D and the OG 5000. At this point, if you've been following Corsair products, their brand ID has been iconic with the repeated triangles, but now have switched to the tri-spoke fidget spinner pattern, which you can see between the OG 5000 to the new Frame 5000, for example. The front panel on the Frame 5000 now holds I/O ports at the bottom instead of the top compared to the original. I don't really have a preference whether the ports are on the bottom or the top of the case, since I never use the front I/O anyways, because I just don't like seeing cables run down or off the front of my case across my desk or hanging from it. Just looks bad. I always plug things into the back of the motherboard. But from the general user standpoint, bottom front makes more sense because it's easier to access when placed on your desk. I do not believe in placing your PC on the floor, and that's where having ports on the top panel would be functionally better. I also covered this discussion in my Frame 4000D review. If you place your PC on the floor, then you are a degenerate. Just kidding. No, but for reals though, don't place your PC on the floor. That's kind of nasty because it's going to suck up dust, dirt, and bugs like no other. But regardless, I think from an influential standpoint, Corsair putting the ports on the front is kind of a good thing. It may nudge people into a good habit of placing their PC on top of their desks. Compared to the Frame 4000D, which has two USB-A 3.0 ports, the 5000 has four. It also has a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2, power button, and your 3.5 audio jack. Additionally, there is an RGB strip above the hub that can be controlled and customized by iCUE, which is not a feature on the Frame 4000. When I was at Computex, I was told that this hub was modular and can be swapped out for something like an audio DAC for those who are really into that. This DAC is also not available yet, and I do not have information on when it would be released. The front mesh cover is detachable via a simple tug, which gives you access to the magnetic dust filter, which is removable by pulling from the bottom tab. Compared to the OG 5000, I'd say that both of the front panels are built equally well, except the new 5000 has more of a 3D pop for its tri-spoke pattern. As for the dust filter, new 5000 has the release tab at the bottom while the tab is on the top for the original 5000. This isn't a big deal, but I think it feels more intuitive and more comfortable when pulling from the top. I gave the exact same feedback when I reviewed the Frame 4000. Now, releasing the dust filter, you get access to your front-mounted fans and the new Infinite Rail system, which is Corsair's way of letting you slide the mounting points between different sized fans, like your 120s and 140s. I did get the white ARGB sample, so it does come with the three 140 RS RGB fans in front and one in the rear. Now, moving on to the side glass panel. OG 5000 has a tempered glass that spans the whole top to bottom, while the new 5000 stops at a portion near the bottom, same style as the Frame 4000, and they are secured via two thumb screws from the back. Since I don't have the black 5000 sample, I was told that the glass on that one is tinted compared to the one on the white here. Now, just my opinion, I do think that both units should have no tint on the glass, because although the tint does have its own charm, depending on what visual and style you're going for, I do feel like the tint does sort of hinder the full elegance of your build. That's just my opinion. Now, the bottom portion of this panel that spans across your PSU compartment is removable via a thumb screw as well. The first thing is that it makes the building process more open as you can easily access tasks like your hard drive installation, PSU cable management, and working on your loop from both sides of the case. This panel is also intended to be very modular as Corsair will eventually release customizable panels made from different materials and even something like a Xenon Edge screen on the side of your case, which they did showcase at Computex. In the accessory kit, they did also provide 2 extra sheets that are interchangeable with the default semi-transparent sheet that's already pre-installed on that shroud cover. One is solid opaque and the other is more of a filter for airflow. The top panel is also secured via 2 back thumb screws with a little handle as well to pull. Here you'll get access to your infinite rail just like the front panel, and you can also see a couple cable management hooks from under the roof. Additionally, you do have a fill port on the top that can be pushed out, and you basically can just install your pass-through fitting here and run a tube to your reservoir. In comparison, the original 5000 comes with a dust filter on top. You do not get one in the new 5000, which makes sense because most people will have top-mounted radiators or fans on exhaust anyways, and it is recommended. And top dust filters, in my experience, have always hindered airflow, which affects your temps by a couple degrees. So it's best to just keep your dust filters on your intakes. Something to note here is that the new 5000 has shifted top-mounted hardware placement more outwards, whereas OG 5000 has it centered. This is going to be important for the radiator to motherboard and RAM clearance, which I will show later when it comes to hardware fitments. I did also talk about this in my Frame 4000D review, and they did make those same changes when compared to the OG 4000. Backside panel comes off via 2 thumb screws, which also has a removable dust filter for your side-mounted fans. I'm going to start from the bottom in the PSU chamber and work my way up to the motherboard tray front and back. The first thing to tackle is removing the bottom dust filter, which you can pull out from the glass panel side. The next thing would be the bottom drive tray, which supports 2 2.5-inch SSDs or 1 3.5-inch hard drive. This tray can be moved in 3 spots, giving you some options for different hardware combinations and clearances. The closest setting will give your PSU and cables about 200mm to fit, while the farthest is about 300. The front half within the chamber also allows either 2 120s or 2 140 fans. I will also add that the cables coming off the front I/O are a bit stiff, so it will take a little bit of a nudging effort if you want to mount your 140 fans down in the chamber. On top of the mid plate, you can mount 2 120 fans. There's a spot for locking down your vertical GPU, and you get a couple grommets for your cable pass-throughs. There is also that same partial flange here, which is consistent with the Frame 4000 that I talked about. Now, in some parts where there are a lot of punched out holes and whatnot, it is important to talk about the sheet metal and quality. The new 5000 here has a much stronger and rigid feel compared to the original 5000. When just tapping along the mid plate, you can tell by how much bounce and flexion there is. The triangles on the OG do have larger individual cutouts than the tri-spoke, which is why there is more flex. The front end of the mid plate is also cut off, giving a ton of room, and I'm really happy to see this because this is especially useful when wanting to mount thicker front radiators. The mid plate can also be removed via 2 screws, which is all part of the modular plan that Corsair had for the Frame series. Okay, let's talk about why you would want to remove it. Well, for one, I think it could make the building process more spacious and hinderless. Although removing this front shroud here wasn't easy enough, but at the same time, you could also customize or modify it, and I feel like there might be some people out there who may want to rock their system without a midplate, similar to the Inwin Dubili, which I also did a build in a couple years ago. On the rear, you have 8 PCIe slots, simple enough. The slot tray, however, can also be rotated and secured via 3 thumb screws on the back if you wanted to go with a vertical GPU. There's a vertical cover here to hide your motherboard side cables, such as the 24-pin and all those front I/O plugins. It has a built-in sliding GPU support that can easily be adjusted via a turn of the screw at the end, and this cover can fully be removed as well from one screw at the top in the back. The other reason why you might want to remove this is if you're planning for an EATX motherboard, since this cover is primarily fitted for ATX. Now, in your accessory box, you also get an extra GPU support bracket mount for an EATX setup, since you have to take it off the default cover. The alternative bracket would then just mount to the motherboard tray in a similar fashion. Next to that cover is another vertical shroud by default if you don't plan on mounting fans or a radiator in this position. In the back of it, you do get a couple Velcro straps for your cables. and in the same method as the GPU cover support, a single screw at the end to remove. In your accessory kit, they will give you that alternative side bracket to mount your 120s and 140s cooling hardware. Then there's a slim horizontal cover piece above the motherboard tray to hide any cables that would be running up top, and this is of course removable as well. Now moving on to the motherboard tray. This is Corsair's new Rapid Route 2.0 system for cable management. This pegboard style is designed for major flexibility, allowing you to use these cable tie blocks that can be moved around and oriented in any way you want. There are also 3 detachable drive trays in the back here that allow you to mount an additional 4 2.5-inch SSDs or another 3.5-inch hard drive, since the bigger tray is the same one as we saw down in the PSU chamber. Additionally, the motherboard tray itself is also detachable via a few screws along the sides, just like the midplate we saw. And based on the cutouts, we can see that it supports back connect motherboards like Asus BTF, MSI Project Zero, and Aorus Project Stealth. I think the massive amounts of punched out holes, not just in the motherboard tray, but also along all the panels of the case, was a clever way to be flexible with the mounting solutions, but also reduce the overall weight of the case, and possibly the production costs as well. And when doing something like this, you have to be careful because you have to find the right balance of how much material to punch out and also how much of the material's strength and rigidity to be able to preserve. And so far, I think Corsair did a pretty good job. Additionally, we also get Velcro straps and cable management hooks, loops, and mounts along the entire edge of the frame as well as the outside on the rear. There is also a little IQ Link labeled plastic tab here that I won't go too deep into because the applications for it aren't quite out yet. But for now, it just serves as a general pass-through for cables. So as you can see with all the internals taken out, the Frame 5000 is very modular and the case is primarily made of 1mm thick steel and will be stronger than many cases out there made of aluminum panels. Now about the hardware fitment inside the case. GPU max clearance is 450mm and CPU max height is 175. Just for reference, even the biggest current GPUs like the 5090 Astro and 5090 Supreme are all under 400, while something as big as the Noctua NHD15 will easily fit for your CPU cooler. Okay, cooling hardware clearance is up next. The first thing I want to get out of the way is what won't work, so it's easier to talk about the rest. The front panel cannot fit radiators like EK because they do tend to run a bit wider. You're going to have issues with the plastic mounting clips on the InfiniRails. But Hardware Labs Black Eye series are also wide, but still fit because, unlike EK, they taper down on the edge, which clears the plastic clips. And of course, Corsair's own XR5 and XR7 and other branded radiators of similar size will be fine. The side panel, however, cannot fit either of the two brands, EK or Hardware Labs, because this mounting bracket has a short L-shaped flange to one side that basically does not clear wider radiators. Brands like Corsair's own Hydro X line or Bits Power will work fine. Just a quick note, Hardware Labs has a few different radiators and I think some will fit and some won't. And there are also a lot of different water cooling brands out there with different products. So I just wanted to give this context for those of you who might be using water cooling hardware that I don't have. So sort of just use what I say here as a guide to check your own clearances. Top panel can fit up to a 420 radiator or 3 140s. I have a Bits Power 420 rad here that's 54mm thick stacked with standard 25mm fans, and it barely clears the motherboard VRM and memory sticks like these tall Dominator titaniums. That's nearly 80mm of thickness up top with a 420 mount. I will say that clearing the motherboard VRM heatsink is going to depend on your motherboard. If you're working with taller heatsinks, my general recommendation is stick with slim 420 rads on top. So something like 30mm on the Corsair XR5 or EK's S420. The front panel can run triple 140 fans but not a 420 radiator. A big 360 rad like Corsair's XR7 with fans can still fit with extra headroom. This is also true with the side mount. However, going this thick on the side will not allow you to mount fans on the front panel. Another thing with the front panel InfiniRails is that you can actually offset the 120 mount a bit to the left in case you need some clearance for whatever is going on in that side panel, depending on your setup. The rear is simple. A single 120 or 140 fan, and it can also do a single 120 rad, even wider models like from EK. But this spot cannot do 140 rads. So all of these clearances are for single radiator setups, for the most part. Things do change though when it comes to multi-rad setups because when you use certain thicknesses, they might run into each other at some point. Which now in the conversation for a fully stacked rig with triple 360 radiators, you want both the front and side rads to be slim so they actually clear each other. If you want a thick rad like an XR7, that should go on top. I also recommend not using a fan in the rear 120 spot and have your tubes run down the back. When it comes to mounting your pump res unit, if you're using a tube style pump, the best place would just be right up against your front mounted rad. If you're using a compact flat res like the BitsPower CR120, the rear is my recommendation, but you'll have to flip the top radiator with tubes running down the front. There are numerous configurations and hardware combos, but I can't show you all of them because that would require an insane amount of product inventory on my end, and I don't have that. But also to be time efficient, like all my reviews, just use what I have in my examples as reference or context for your own measurements. In my final build, I went with the dual XR5 360s from Corsair along with the LX120 fans, which have a really nice and convenient daisy chain system with IQ Link. I took the top rad for exhaust and front rads on intake. I also decided to stick with the default side cover because I love the clean flat look in the back, which makes the XD6 reservoir pop. Quick mention to MSI, they did send me the Z890 Edge motherboard to use and I think it fits nicely into this build. It's got a quick release M.2 heatsink for screwless installation, which is really convenient, and a quick release button for the GPU, so I don't have to squeeze my finger in for that PCIe release tab like some other boards. This Z890 is actually one of my favorite white ATX boards in 2025. I also did a reel on my Instagram talking about the little brother ITX as well if you want to check that out. The rest of this build include an Intel 285K, an RTX 4080, Corsair Vengeance low profile RAM, Corsair MP700 Elite SSD, and Corsair RMX 1000 watt power supply. Overall, just a simple loop with some pretty beefy core components that make sense for a dual 360 radiator setup, and illustrates some of the talking points I made. Hopefully this review helped. Let me know what you think of the new Frame 5000D. Would you take it over the old 5000, or would you prefer something smaller like the Frame 4000? Also, if I missed anything in this video, let me know down in the comments below.